I've got several down movements. Some of them are gaps down, some of them are strong downtrends. And my objective in this video is to show you the conditions that will typically give us those and alert us to those particular starts in the down movements. I think of them as signals, and you can recognize them in just a variety of different downtrend movements. I want you to also think in relation to the proximity group patterns, primarily their location and their shapes, because when we think of the three gap patterns, either up or down, the power four, the power pink, blue, white, and yellow, typically have a close, or excuse me, they typically have a location that repeats itself with certain patterns. Generically, they typically, for downtrends, the power lines will be in the underneath the power orange lines, but that's not always the case, as you'll see here. One of the other things that you'll see oftentimes in both in gaps up and gaps down is directional divergence between Zion, Zip Zion, or excuse me, Power Zion and the Power 4 lines. I have a couple of Power 3 examples in here as well. In this first one that I'm going to show you, we have I've picked this day here. It's not the gap down day. The gap down day is actually 2 days ahead, but it's very significant the primary down movement is on this day. And this particular, we're only dealing with a $5.50 stock here, but as you can see, from the point at which the trend blue line turned around, which was back here, that's the first day that we had a TOC pattern in trend blue. And after that, we should basically, the price should go down. It has not gone down. It's been held up by the moving average 100, the white dash line. When you see that happen, it's basically a case of confined pressure that is going to break loose. And in this case here, on the vertical green line day, we had the close at 539, let's call it 540, and on the 3 days later it closed at 393. So it dropped from 540 to $4, and that difference, if it was that difference is about probably 25%, and somewhere in there. And so in 3 days, the value of the stock drops 25%. That's real significant. On this day, you can see a W pattern in trend red. Each bottom of the W is flat. And it formed the first W over here and the second W over here. It then up-touched into the green line, the trend green line. Likewise on that day, and that's basically a pattern that we will see on that day also. Trend gray has gone under the power 3, and now we have all 3 lines underneath the trend trio, yellow, pink, blue. And basically we have zero price movement. I mean, it closed yesterday at 539, and today it closed at 539. So in this particular case, we're obviously picking up on a potential down movement, and the price is moved practically nothing. I mean, a couple of pennies in 7, 8, 9 days. Even though all our indicators are showing us that we're going down. On this day right here is the last day that power red is above zero. The day before the green line, power red drops underneath the zero line, and when that happens, that's pretty much the day that you should identify that potentially that is the day to get into the transaction. So you could, on the vertical green line day, you could have bought or sold short that day, and it would have been a good move. You would have done that, or could have done that, based on one big item, and that is power yellow is highest and going down. Power or zip yellow is highest, and it's kind of running flat, but we just know that it's going to go down. And we know also that it's being held up by the 100 moving average. We have on this day, we have a couple of divergent conditions. I pointed out the red and the red up touching the green. Red and green are actually divergent in this case, and we have we don't see it too often. We have zip red and gray up and zip yellow and blue down. We also have zip yellow at 78 and zip blue at 59. Now that's just about a 20-point separation between yellow and blue. Blue is telling us, blue always moves faster or in the direction of where things are going typically. Blue is just heading down, and there's yellow still holding up. But those two are very close from a code perspective, but yet blue drops down significantly. And the other thing we have here also is that zip Zion ran a little bit flat from the day before the green vertical line to the green vertical line, and zip green went up. And I think that was a case, if you look at the candle, well, we don't have too much of a lower tail. I'm not sure why it did that, but typically it does that when it's at the end of the day. It drives the price up a little bit, and the short-term movement moves the green higher. Who knows for sure? I'd have to look at it on a 3-minute chart to see what happened. But the other thing we have is we have zips or swing pink in a flat top peak or a low angle top peak, which tells us that the price is going down. Now, I say that because, number one, swing peak reacts faster than swing Zion, and swing Zion is in a low angle down. And with swing Zion in a low angle down, it's in a bucket, and it can basically be a bucket that next day it goes up, or it can be a continuation pattern of a bottlenose pattern. And so, and in this case, obviously, it did swing Zion did a bottlenose, and swing pink turned around on the peak as it would normally be expected. The other things that we had here was zip pink was very low, separated from the other lines quite a bit, even though the price did not change much. And so it's always good to look at the price. And so in this particular case, you just note that red and green and gray were all under the trend trio. Again, your price is running flat. The yellow twins, just to kind of summarize, were highest and going down. Trend or power red was way down there. power red on the vertical line day was minus 1.3. And now keep in mind, we've still got 2 more days before the gap actually occurs, and things just get better after that. So that's that example. The next example is here, where it's basically a $16 stock. It's on the vertical green line day. It closes at 16.33, and then it opens the next day at 12.80. So somewhere around $4, it drops in one day. On the vertical green line, we have zip red down, zip gray up. We're in divergence there. We also have divergence in zip green and zip Zion. And as well, we have up touches in the swing chart. Swing yellow up touches blue, swing pink is up touching gray, and swing pink and swing Zion are again in divergence. You're going to see swing pink and swing Zion in divergence a lot in gaps. That's one critical thing that that's one particular thing that occurs in a large percentage of gaps. Now, and in the trend chart, if you look closely, we have a high M, higher right peak 3-day pattern. And so trend gray has a higher peak on the 3rd day, but keep in mind it is, close to 0. It's not really on a peak, and it's the only high M pattern that we have. And if you've seen some of the other videos, you know that I've commented on trend gray's ability to give us a good pattern, like for example a head and shoulders pattern, or in this case a high M pattern, and none of the other indicators will do that on that particular move. When that occurs, everything else is going down. In your power chart, you have power Zion that's in a low angle down, and it's gone under 0, but it is above power orange. The power 4, pink, blue, white, and yellow, are all underneath power orange. And so what we've got here is, like we see so many times, Zion is opposite of the power 4. Zion is above orange, the power 4 is under orange. That's a location that typically occurs reasonably frequently with gaps down. It's the location pattern typical for that specific specific pattern in a gap down situation. Also, in this particular case, we have a little bit of a divergence in that power white is up and power yellow is down. And so that is a second or a third type of divergence, if you will. Zip red and gray were divergent, swing pink and Zion were divergent, power yellow and white were divergent, and as a result of that, we have a gap down. Obviously, we also know that the 3 patterns that are needed are the identical indicators, the gaps, and the proximity groups. And when we have the conditions that support all 3 of those patterns, we then have a gap. In this case here, trend red up touches trend pink, and we know, if you don't know, the best line for red, green, or gray to touch is trend pink, because it has the most powerful reversal ability. And so red is up touching pink, green is up touching blue, and red has crossed over green. Now that's basically the crossover for the start of an uptrend. But as you can see, we have a red candle on that day. we're banging into the pink line, and the green is banging in. The green is lower than the blue line. It's not like it's real super close, but it's definitely in that area of up touching it. And while those up touches are going on, because an up touch always causes a gap or a down movement, in this case here, when we've got the qualifying conditions for all three of the gap patterns, it then causes a gap down. And obviously power orange is under 0. The trio, yellow, pink, blue, is under 0, and the red and green is under 0, leading all of that information creates a potential downtrend environment or next day down movement. And in this case here, it's created a gap down. The next one I want to show you is, this is in a stock that's $19 I guess. It closed on this day here at 1951. And we have trend red down significantly, trend gray down in a low angle down. And we have a lot of post tops, or in other words, low angles on peaks. Power blue and power pink. In this case here, note that power blue is higher, and typically when power blue is higher, we get a stronger down movement, even though blue and pink are interchangeable as a deep cycle indicator. Mind you, it's the short deep cycle, not like swing gray, which is your primary deep cycle indicator. But power pink and blue are your identifying your short-term trend. They're not identifying pullbacks or rallies, because your trend gray, green, zip red, those lines, the fast lines, are going to identify your pullbacks and your rallies. But the trend, the short-term trend that's created by the three groups, the trend trio, yellow, pink, blue, the power orange and green, and the swing red and green, those 7 lines tell us a lot about the forces within the movement. And whether they're above 0 or under 0 also tells us a lot. Because like the trio here, when we hit the vertical green line, the trio is under 0, and green and orange are under 0. And when things are under 0, even though they're going up, they can be easily turned around, as in this case here. The downtrend actually, or one of the key elements to this whole situation, actually occurred the day before. And I moved the green line over that one day to show you. We have a zip green pinpoint top at 100. Now, obviously, on this day, we do not know that it's going to be a pinpoint. It could go on and be flat, as far as we know. But it doesn't look like it, because we have one key signal. And that signal is that zip red and gray are down. Remember, if you don't, let me explain it, that when we're dealing with pink-green tops, this is zip green at a 100 and zip pink just under it and climbing up. That constitutes the conditions with which the pink-green top can go down. It needs to have zip pink right next to zip green. And that's true in probably about 90 to 95% of the cases. In the other cases, zip pink is typically fairly low, like, under 90 down to even 70. Not always true. It can be 95 sometimes, but, like in this case, it's higher than what I normally think of it as. Zip pink is at 90 right now. And so, but what we have is the signal. Remember, when zip green is at 100 and zip pink is just under it, we typically have zip red, gray, yellow, and blue going down. But as you can see right here, zip blue and yellow are going up, But what you need to understand is that ZIP blue and yellow have a location that's under 50, which means their stopping point is really low, which means technically by measuring pressure, we are way down. So there's a real strong likelihood that we can, just from the ZIP chart, we can tell that this will be a pinpoint top. And we can really verify it when we see the swing chart and we see swing Zion has come up. Remember, swing Zion is your price barometer, tracks the price of the stock, and it's going up on that day. But what happens? Swing pink, which is a leading indicator, tells us what's going to happen the next day. Swing pink has already turned flat and actually gone down a little bit. So we got a low angle down on a peak in swing pink, which is divergent to the swing Zion line. And so we really know that things are going to go down. All right, then on the next day, what do we run into? We run into a small red candle. It never went down. But again, if you've had a chance to listen to some of the videos, you know that divergence always doesn't occur the next day. And I call this a stalled candle, because you get a tiny red candle when it should have gone down. There should have been a deep red candle here. But then what happens the following day? Boom. You get a strong gap down with a decent red candle under it. And so divergence can happen the next day. It can happen the second day like this one does, or it can happen a third day. We usually don't give it much value past that third day. Because there's just other factors normally that come into play. But obviously at this point here, when we look at this, we have ZIP gray above red, and we know that when gray is above red, that's typical and indicative of a next day down. So, and we've gone over the top of the peak on the price chart, so there's a good chance that we're going to go down there. Your trend green, your swing green is under zero, and swing red is above zero, about ready to go under. Swing red's about ready to go under zero, which again is a strong downtrend. Swing yellow is flat on a peak, parallel with swing red. And the fact that swing yellow is on a peak and real low tells us that it's going to go down strongly. But when it's tied in and parallel with a strong line, a heavy line like swing red or swing green, then it's even stronger than that in its reaction. Now, when you examine it and look at it like this, it doesn't look like it's parallel with the red line. But it is going down and it is close, and technically we would call that parallel with the red line. And just as important, ZIP yellow on the swing yellow on the vertical green line day is at 0.11. So I mean, it's right next to zero. So you can also see that swing Zion is crossed under 50 going down. Swing yellow our ZIP Zion and ZIP yellow are going down. ZIP blue is right in there. They're on peaks that are basically going down under the 50 line, I might add, which is beneficial because we know that there's not pressure to drive it up. All the pressure is being driven down. We recognize that. And we can see the strength in our movement as well. So that's what that particular example is like. And this one here, I have, I'm going to take the time I forgot to put in a vertical red line, green line. This is what this one looks like. We're looking basically at at flat candles for several days, and in this particular case, price red is highest. Normally we see price green highest before it starts to drop, but in this case here, price red is highest. We also see that the swing Zion has done a low angle down when Zip Zion has done a low angle down when Zip Green is at 100. And so in the short term it got pushed up, but in the long term it had no power to stay up there, even though we got a tiny green candle. And again, we have the same thing there. Zip yellow and blue. Zip yellow is at 30 and Zip blue is at 32. So those are not high, and they're in low angle tops, as is swing Zion and swing pink, telling us that the next day things are going to go down. You can see that as well in the price red and price green lines. And we can, if you expand on this, you can see that yellow just went over the top of zero, so it's kind of, we identify that as poking its nose out above things. You've heard that expression or seen how I kind of talk about that. And that's one of those cases that we have here in the swing yellow. But we also notice that swing red and green are both down under zero. And so we have in the trend red chart, we have trend red at 54. That's a real nice place for the trend red to be at. It's in a low angle top, which means it's going down the next day. When the line is mixed in, when trend red and green are mixed in amongst the trio, the yellow, pink, and blue, you usually get nothing. You can see long movements of red above green, and the price will be fairly flat. There's hundreds of examples like that, and this is just another one. This yellow line that's up here, by the way, is a solid yellow line. It's basically the dashed yellow line in the candle chart. I just made it solid in this particular example so that we could see things a little better. Now, I wanted to comment here. I haven't commented a lot, but I forget sometimes, and that is the location of the power lines. This is a classic power Zion down and the power 4 up. Blue, pink, white, and yellow are up, and Zion is down. But the way we look at this, we would think of this as the power 3. The pink, blue, and white are above the orange. Zion is above the orange, so the location is defined as Zion and the power 3 above orange. But Zion is directionally divergent. It's down and the power 3 is up, and yellow is lowest. And oftentimes we'll see this with strong movements down. Now, the other thing I want to point out to you here in this example, on this day, this is a low price stocked, but on this day we were at $2.24. 3 days later, down here, 3 red candles later, we are at 52 cents. Now, if that thing was only at $2 and it went down to 50 cents, that would be a 75% drop in value. I mean, that's higher than the vast majority of gaps, but it took place in 3 days. And so what I'm trying to convey here is that we cannot always identify gaps, and it absolutely gaps the next day. But what we identify is strength. Again, I think you've heard it said that the DTVB system, it has a premise of reversal, recognition, identification. And so we recognize when things are going to turn around. We also see it in strength. And it becomes just like these location patterns. A gap down will typically have a handful of location patterns, meaning that the power 3 and the power Zion line are in a particular place. when the gap goes down. And we have particular shapes in the proximity group that occur with particular patterns. In this case here, 3 days earlier, we had red cross over. No, actually, it's 2 days earlier. 2 days before the green vertical line, power red crossed over green, and that became the crossover day. And then 2 days later, we get to power green, and now what we have is the third day of a sky touch, which is, or what we refer to from the perspective of having a gap up, I should say. I'm misthinking my responses here. What would be anticipated as, or thinking that we got a potential sky touch when we have a gap down, and this identifies, or let me rephrase that, through the mechanisms that we have in seeing what else is there, we have the ability to tell that it's going to go down. That's especially true with the price red and green. Price red in this case is at 120, green is at 112. We would very seldom or potentially get a gap up based on what we see here. Zip Zion is in a low angle. I mean, there's many lines in low angle up peaks, which identifies the situation as going down. And so when the location pattern that you have is critical to the I shouldn't say critical. I should say the location pattern is one of the things that we look at, but we look at normal patterns. Think of it like the location patterns are normally in this place or that place when we see a gap. The shape patterns normally have this type of shape when we see gaps. There's just, all kinds of different examples that we can identify with. But the other reason that this would not be a gap up is because we're dealing with 3 lines up. And in some case, we like to see a bottlenose when we have 3 lines up, but and about the only thing you have close to that is either power white or power yellow, but and blue, I guess, a little bit too. But we basically have 3 days up, which is indicative of a next day down. So also we've got trend red at 54, trend green at 21. So that's 33 points apart. That's really high. The spread difference between trend red and trend green is really strong, causing us to have a gap down. So don't confuse what you're looking at. Or let me say this, if you are confused, then wait. But let's say you were confused on this particular movement. So what's gonna happen? You're gonna wait till the open of the next day, and you're gonna see that here, in this case here, it opened at 224. Its high was 224, and the low was 138. So it dropped about 90 or 85 cents on the next day, but it immediately started down. So even if you goofed up and you thought it was going to, let's say you thought it was going to gap up, well, when it closes at 224 and it opens at 224, obviously you instantly know that it didn't gap. And so sometimes after you've done it for a long time, you begin to see how these things work. And this may be, however you look at the particular opportunity that you're looking at, if you feel that it's not it's not going to do exactly as how you think, then you got to wait and watch. It's just not it's not worth it to be wrong. And this is why I'm encouraging you to listen to just as many possible videos as you can. I encourage you to spend, weeks and months if you need to on the website before you even do the 14-day trial, because you need the experience of seeing the movements of the indicators in relation to how the price responds. So, but it's pretty easy when you've got everything under zero. In this particular example, it's pretty easy to see that if there was a gap, it's going to gap down. And in this particular case, I mean, even when you got a $2.25 stock and it drops 85 cents, that's a 33% loss in one day. Or should I say, if you sold it short, that's a 33% gain on whatever you put into the purchase, just in one day. So it's not rocket science. It's just common sense on looking at the indicators and having the experience to see how those movements take place. So encourage you to listen to more videos. That's oh, wait a minute, I got one more. I'm sorry. All right, this one here has again has a gap down. It it closed on this day at $33.43. The next day it closed at $27.01. And so it dropped down about $6 the first day, and then another dollar or so the second day. And on this day here, we have several things that have taken place. Just to go to the trend chart, we have trend red 3 days up, and it never got above trend blue. But so we've got an uptouch blue, which qualifies us for a gap down scenario. It crossed over green, so that gives it more strength. But again, it's a stronger push up, but the reaction is going to be a stronger push down, or as just as strong a push down. And this, when you look at it, you're going to say, well, that can't be. I got a little red T-top doji candle here. Well, what's happened also is that you got a real long lower tail. And, without looking at a 3-minute chart, you can't tell how many hours were spent pounding that thing back up. But whatever they did, they brought it back, but it was still never got to a green candle. It's still red, but it's very close to where it opened. And so on this particular day, we have a trend red uptouch, which gives us those pattern, or gives us those the requirement in the uptouch category. And we have in the proximity group, we have power Zion under green, the power 4, it's I guess all under orange. So all 5 indicators are under orange, but again, we have divergence. The power Zion is up, or wait a minute here, let me look. No, we got yellow and white are divergent, and pink and blue are divergent. This one you don't see too often, but this again is the pairs divergence. We see, or excuse me, I said that wrong. The pairs divergent is when pink and blue are up and white and yellow are down. In this particular case, we have the pairs themselves. White is up, yellow is down, and pink is up, or pink is down and blue is up. And so it's individual paired divergence, and then Zion is up touching green in a in a bottom of cycle lower pattern, which is basically after the peak. That is the normal lower high of a downtrend. That's the primary definition of a downtrend. And so this zip BOC pattern, this power Zion pattern, it up touches the green. It's also in a lower high. It's in a lower high, which by definition is our downtrend. Now, over in the swing chart, we have pink that stuck its nose out up above. You have power blue that's under green already, and it's gone under green way back here about 3 days before the vertical green line. So that's the start of a downtrend. You can see that the zip Zion has been continually going down, and then the price has been pretty much the same, and then all of a sudden it just crashes. But you get a low angle up in your zip red. You've got a pattern like this in swing yellow. In other words, you've got a BOC higher pattern, and that's indicative of a stronger push up. But again, it's hard to imagine that when you're dealing with a candle that looks like that. You just have to think it through. The nose sticking out on the pink is one of those things that we see for a downtrend. It's just like over here back 4 days. It looks like you got swing Zion sticking its nose out above swing gray, and what happens? You get a nice red candle the following day, bigger than the average. I mean, a lot bigger when you expand it out and look at it. And so that sticking its nose out can be a powerful movement. In this particular case here, with Zion, 4 days before the green vertical line, we got that huge red candle. Looks like it dropped over $1. And then, of course, on this one here, we got a big gap down with a red candle going down. So but key to this, the whole thing, is our push-up. If you look at trend gray, you have a BOC higher pattern, but the only thing is that BOC higher pattern is just monstrous. I mean, it could be 10 times, 15 times the value of the change, and that calculation is what drives this whole thing. Trend gray right there 2 days before the vertical green line is at 0.59. 1 day before the vertical green line, trend gray is at 0.22. So you're basically at 0.4, a little bit under 0.4. But it moved from that 0.4 position, from that 0.22 position up to, on the vertical green line day, up to 23. So that's 0.4. If it was 0.5, that'd be twice for each point, and we almost got 24. So it'd be like 48 times the difference, the DIFF difference. And if you haven't heard me talk about diff, it's basically a divergent condition in a line indicator length change. And so what's happened here is gray moved 0.4 of a point, and then it moved 24 points, which is just a monster. And what did we get in price movement? I mean, the open to the low on this day was 33.44. I mean, the open to the close. The open to the close was 33.44, and the close was 33.43. So it closed a penny under itself. But yet, trend gray jumped 24 points. See, that's a line indicator length condition that we identify a strong next day movement. Again, you have to identify with which way the movement is going to go. In this case here, it's very easy to see because we have the up touches. The trend red, up touch blue, and trend green is doing the same thing. We're up touching the line, the yellow, pink, blue under zero, I might add. That's very powerful. Power Zion is up touching the green. And then, of course, you got all the divergence that I talked about between yellow and white and between pink and blue. And we also have, I'm not sure if we have a little bit of divergence between zip red and zip gray in that it, significantly, you got significant line differences, but again, there's not there's not a significant divergent condition except for one thing, and this happens, and I'm not exactly sure why. But zip blue and zip yellow have come back together on the vertical green line day. And there was no movement in price. See, and that normally causes a significant movement in price. And again, this is in that classification. The vertical green line day is in that classification of a stagnated candle, a candle that just does not move when it should have moved. And so when you find that stalled candle, you typically find the next day in a big movement, and that's what you have here. Zip green is at zero. Again, with everything coming down, we know we have a downtrend taking place. Those are the 5 examples that I had. This went a little bit longer than I was hoping to get it all done by, but those are key elements in how we look at the different signals that will tell us which way things are moving, either uptrends or downtrends or gaps up or gaps down. Enjoy your time trading. Have fun. Make it fun. I can't overemphasize that. Make sure you got the right system. I mean, these videos are done to show you how our system works and how we can find gaps before they even gap. And it's all done through the 3 pattern analysis, as I hope you've been able to tell through even these 5 examples. And we'll see you on the next video.